Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here. I'm going to play some Hearts of Iron 4, as you can see, but this time I'm going to play as the United States for a little while. We're not ended the last series, and I had been waiting for the new major patch coming out before starting another series, but I just felt like doing this, so we're going to do some of this. So let's get set up here. We're going to start out with the WPA. That's the Works Progress Administration. That's what that stands for. It was a similar to sort of the various German organization TOTE and similar public works type Audubon type projects, and it all over the United States, all kinds of stuff, very Keynesian and approach to the unemployment problems the U.S. was having during the Depression. I don't think it was a major cause of the continuing excuse me, continuing depression or making it worse. We're gonna be doing, let's just go for the basic, even though we're not going to be starting at very many wars. Okay, we want to, well, build some here in Tennessee, the Tennessee Valley Authority. Don't know if that came under the Works Progress Administration or not. Like I was saying, I don't think it was a major cause to making the Depression worse. It was that I think was more of a carrier fighter. We're still on these old fighters. Okay, well, I want to get a regular fighter into production as well. And shipping. Okay, well. Is this current class of submarines? Yeah. So let's add a few more. And let's also start building a carrier. We are the U.S.A. Yorktown class. Let's speed this up. I really think it was the massive over-regulation of the FDR administration that made the Great Depression, bigger than the normal depressions. I remember many years ago going somewhere, don't remember, somewhere in the mountains in California with my parents. I was, older teenager at the time, and hiked into the desert to see this really beautiful bridge that was built across this canyon in sort of the desert, and it was and it's still there, I'm sure. Art Deco bridge, nice concrete, really beautiful. But I went across this sort of valley there, but there's no roads connected to it. As part of this Works Administration project, they felt they needed a bridge there. They were going to, at some point, build a highway, or not a modern freeway type thing, but a two-lane highway through there. That never happened. But they built this really nice bridge out there, and just some rough up to it. Gotta keep pushing. Stop! I hate this thing. Rough dirt track to get the trucks in to build this bridge, but there's no real, it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't connect to anything. So Okay, no, national focus. So we've got that. Let's do. And we have enough to improve our government. Political power game. We'll start that early. We have the Allied radio pack for music. A little different than the German. Music. Electronic engineering. Oh, the Spanish Civil War broke out now. Hate that. Once you hit OK, everything starts going again. God, I hope they get that fixed. Okay. Can we send Lend-Lease? I don't want to send volunteers. No. Not enough world tension or something, most likely. Okay, well. Let's build a heavy cruiser. Part of the reason I wanted to do this is to just see how well this reflects my vision of America at the time and its ability to build things. Because if you've been watching my other German series, you saw how much Liberia had built using the trade system. It was totally unrealistic. Not that that's fixed here, but I just wanted to see how well this went. And sometimes, or often with the dealing with mechanics, they focus on a few majors like the U.S. and Germany and get those right, but the consequences for, we're going to do concentrated industry. I don't think we rename it much. Bombing. Realize how much it affects other miners. Okay, well, so we can do trucks. We need to do trucks. We should already have trucks researched, I think, like the Germans do. Okay, video on technology. I'm going to do the support Rock Island. Rock Island Arsenal is a major arsenal for the U.S. I'm mostly familiar with like M1 Garands, which are later than 1936 period, but also 1911, 45 caliber pistols, and other things they built in the small arms as well as heavier weapons. Two things that sort of coincided to make the American Depression, the Great Depression. One was, of course, the stock market bubble. People were allowed to buy stocks on a margin, and if you don't know what that means, it means like they could like, oh, I want to buy 100 shares, but pay for only 10 shares. and put it on, because everything was booming, on a margin that if there was a margin call, meaning if it was thought maybe the stocks weren't going to keep growing, you would be told that you had to, on a particular stock, you had to make that full payment, or you would lose all of your interest in the stocks. And not everything was like 10%, but it was a percentage of it. So if there was a margin call on something and you didn't have the cash to put into it, you lost everything you had invested in that particular stock. Well, and this of course is a bad thing to have any significant margins like that for people putting them in. It started to snowball as several of these major margin calls happened, and people couldn't make their margins, and they were on certain things, so they were like selling some of their other stocks that they may have just had a margin on it that there hadn't been a margin called yet. And so when everybody was wanting to sell, who was either had the cash or wanted to buy. And I mean, this was not just your big investments, as we now see, sort of Wall Street brokers, hedge fund type peoples, or like unions that have huge amounts in it. This was just about everybody down in at least a lot of the urban areas. That I don't think a lot of farmers had this, but a lot of urban areas, people just $10 back then was like $100 or whatever now, but they had $10 to spare. They'd buy $100 or something worth of stock on some of these things, and as they were going up, this was so great, because they'd go up, they'd sell. They wouldn't get the full amount back because it's still the margin, but it allowed you to go. But with a margin call, they could, if you owned a home, if you had anything, other property, they could come and try to secure it. So you had to cough up the money one way or another. There wasn't, a protection for you. You just, if you had a small home or something, so you thought you were risking your $10, well, really you're risking your $300 or whatever home. And so people were just selling their stuff, and it was just made the stock market collapse. There just wasn't that much cash available for all of the inflated prices of the stocks. So that was one of the main reasons that the Depression happened so big with that stock market crash. The other one was the Dust Bowl out here in the center of the U.S. Farming techniques were being used, if I understand all this correctly, sort of European farming techniques. Well, Europe, especially I know in Britain a little bit more, crops failed when you had too much rain. Well, in the central United States, crops fail when you don't have rain. Well, the big sort of difference there is, obviously why they fail, but when you plow up deeply and turn the soil over in the European manner, it works in Europe. When you did it out here in the central U.S., where you had often, most of the time, a sufficiency of rain, but you didn't have an over-efficiency of rain, that the soil wasn't set up right to be able to turn it over and plow in such a way, and because they hadn't experienced anything, and it took years for this to happen, for the condition to happen. A lot of areas were just sort of the Great Plains where there weren't any trees, so the wind could pick up. So with a dry spell, it turned this great dust bowl, and if you've ever looked at any of the documentaries, it was super, because it wasn't sand, it was this dust, super fine powder that would just literally could choke you. But people would spend days, weeks, months with wet rags over their mouths, even sleeping, to keep the dust from accumulating into them, because it just became this dust bowl. So that because the grass dried up and some of the other things, that just turned these fields into a terrible situation because of a lack of water, and so the farming techniques weren't set up properly for it, and they hadn't built tree barriers around farms and things like that that would stop the wind from gathering speed and all this stuff. So this great Dust Bowl, this great food producer here in the U.S., it didn't affect so much on the East Coast because they did have a lot more rain and forestation and other reasons for it to happen. And so there were so many people, and a lot of them moved west into California, where there was a lot of, in the Central Valley here, food growth. And this is where a lot of the people who lost their farms moved to California in hopes to get agricultural jobs. But it was the combination of these two big events, the stock market crash and the Dust Bowl, that caused the American Great Depression. Now we can talk about how I believe the Roosevelt administration, yeah, let's go for this, is responsible for making it worse, longer, deeper. I will say, sort of like I was saying on the the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, some of the programs that they set up to feed the poor and feed the hungry definitely made the situation for the average person a little better, in that they weren't starving. And that's not what I'm criticizing them for. I'm criticizing, I mean, a laissez-faire capitalist sort of goes, well, not that they should starve, but that charitable organizations that collect money voluntarily from people should be the means of helping the people out, not that the people should starve, as opposed to the government. I'm not arguing that position. I'm just arguing that the long-term attempts to administer federally, they set up regulations for agriculture, set up for the federal government. Now the federal government, through the Interstate Commerce Clause, regulates, sorry if this is too much of a history lesson for you guys, but regulates the idea of commerce between Florida and Georgia here, so that you can't have internal barriers. You don't have, say, a company here making something that is unsafe but selling it in Georgia, and then the people in Georgia not able to sue or limit the importation of the products coming in. So it sort of regulates the commerce between the states, because each of the states is supposed to have its own internal regulations. Well, it was during the FDR administration is where a lot of the regulations still exist to this day, started to regulate everything, because tomatoes grown in one state could be, not is, but could be shipped to another state. So you had to abide by all these regulations. So to the point of telling you what you could grow where and when, and to the point that they were getting into it as this went on, not in the first couple of years, but as this went on, regulating almost literally home gardens that might sell to a local, a real local grocery store type shop, not a big chain thing. And so that really stifled, that there was no way in hell that food grown in some little rural town, outside of a little rural town, and all they were selling us at the local grocery store, was ever going to go to other states. And so the federal government got involved in all this regulation. And the sort of the absurdity is clearly shown in a local produce person selling purely to a local grocer that doesn't ship out to anybody else. But this regulated toothpaste, well, you could, you're making toothpaste in Texas, you might sell it to somebody in Illinois. Well, or it might get even if you sell it, it might get resold. And so there were just innumerable regulations going on and on and on that stifled any sort of growth in the economy. And for many of you Europeans, I know we just had the Brexit vote that Britain's decided not to be European anymore. But if you look at a similar thing, in a country in the scale and the size of, say, Belgium, maybe a lot of these regulations and national control make a certain amount of sense, because let me switch that up to sort of modern day Netherlands, Holland here. They may go, hey, well, we need food production to help feed the populace. But the farmer's going, hey, we get more for tulips or other flowers, and we get more money for that. And they go, yeah, but we don't think importing food from, say, Canada, and the great wheat fields up in Canada, yeah, it's cheaper, but that may become unreliable because of a war, shipping problems in Canada, whatever it may be. So yes, you can grow tulips or another flower, but you still need to have a certain amount of overall farm producing some sort of food product. Okay, that works on a scale that in that sort of scale. But when you realize that there's, especially if you go with Alaska and Hawaii, there's 50 of these Hollands here, not one, 50. That's where I sort of, get into the idea that all 50 of these are regulated from Washington, D.C., is when you really start. Even if a policy makes sense, it makes sense for New York State or New Jersey, but it doesn't make sense for Texas, because it can't, because they're different places, whatever the policy is. And it doesn't mean that the policy is all wrong. It doesn't mean and it can't work in Texas. It means Texas should see how it works in New York or Pennsylvania or wherever, see how a policy works there, and go, hey, yeah, that's good, but we need to change it to be this way, whatever this way is, for Texas, that is much, much larger and has a different agricultural base, because a lot of this is dry territory. You do a lot of cattle ranching, which is different than cattle farming. And so, the policies aren't the same. And yeah, I know this is my political diatribe, but on scales of economies. Okay, let's see. We want to do, research some air doctrines. Bonuses or Navy experience. We're going to go with air. Maybe Navy should have been bid first, because some of the effects take longer to happen. I don't know. A lot of the the Olympic Games. Good. A lot of these national focuses reduce research time on things, so you sort of want to try to take advantage of that and match them up. I'm going to turn the day-night cycle on for a moment. Why didn't... Oh, because we're going so fast. No, I just don't like that. I know the developers think that that's really cool, but I don't like that. I've yet to really see a need to have, because obviously day-night should affect ongoing operations, but and if one nation gets a bonus because, or a particular bonus or detriment for fighting at night, it should matter compared to the other one, where if they both have the same things, then they'll get the same bonuses, penalties, and bonuses. But so it's a good thing in the game, but just watching that is just drives me up the wall. Okay, now we're all going to go with the Navy next. Bureau of Ships. FDR, as a younger man, was in the United States Navy, so he always had a better focus and um, attention on naval matters than the Army. Before, and I guess some sort of modern research figured out that he didn't have polio, but some other similar sort of thing. But before he had that and was, in the wheelchair, he was a rather fit, athletic man, and was, like in the United States Navy for a while. Okay, what do we have here? Election of 1936. The day of the presidential election has arrived. The incumbent Franklin Delano Roosevelt has already implemented several of the programs referred to collectively as the New Deal, intended to make the U.S. or to take the U.S. out of the Great Depression. Well, at first they didn't call it the Great Depression. That was that sort of an after term, as we were talking about. Well, after it was going for a while. While many of the efforts have been popular, his plans to further extend the role and power of government have been met with criticism from his opponent, Republican Alf Landon. Don't really know much about him at all. Coming from the oil industry, Landon wants to see greater economic freedom, while Roosevelt and the Democrat Party want to expand Social Security and ensure economic stability. The election may be a close call or a major victory for the Democrats. Okay. Yes, see, that's one thing. They wanted to ensure economic stability, even if it meant low growth, and expand Social Security, which I know a fair number of you aren't in the U.S., so that Social Security particularly, it means something that you pay into to support you in retirement later on, but also if you get injured on the job or other things, that there would be a government program to take care of you. And when we were talking about other things beyond what we normally refer to as Social Security. Okay, so let's take a quick look here. Gains National Spirit New Deal, which grants infrastructure construction speed plus 20% and national unity plus 10%. Okay, that seems reasonable from a setups. So if we want to build more infrastructure. Now the Republicans, the Democratic Party will now be called the Republican Party. So just do it still. And that gains Standard Oil of California, which grants industrial research of time minus 10% concerned. Alf Landon becomes President of the United States. Staunch constitutionalists. Ideology drift defense plus. Well, I'm going to go just for historical purposes with the Democrat. Yes, I think the Republicans would have gotten things. Oh, it might have been harder for a time, but I think they would have gotten things better, quicker. Okay, well, we're going to go over to greater resource extraction. So we can use this here or here. Now we have some bonuses for air to choose from. Make sure we're getting some naval. So let's see. This is basically the U.S. path. Traditionally, I believe. Yeah, for fun, we'll try this out. Let's go with light tanks. We want to get some tanks. Be able to start some production when the time comes. Excuse me. Still having a lingering cough after this cold. Okay, well, we're going to take this opportunity here to end this episode. Thanks for listening to me talk about my thoughts on the 1930s in America. See you for more Hearts of Iron very soon.